Alright, you guys, today we're going to look a little bit closer at rewriting trig expressions without fractions. Now, in class we talked about a few different ways to do this, and so I wanted to write down some tips here, as well as add a third tip that maybe we didn't talk about in class, because as I've been working through some problems, I've noticed that this seems to work for all of them that I've used, so I'm interested to see when you guys try some problems if you notice you can use the same tips if they work for you. If they don't, then stick with what works for you. So we kind of already talked about getting a difference of squares in the denominator, because then we can use a Pythagorean identity to simplify the denominator. Now, one trick I've noticed is that usually at this point, if I have a trig identity that I use to simplify in the bottom into the denominator, that means that it's either like x, it's like tangent squared x or sine squared x or maybe 1 or something like that. But all of those are trig functions or expressions that I can move into the numerator by using the inverse trig identities. So that's something to consider. We're going to do an example of this with a new problem, 1 over 1 plus sine x. So let's get started. Alright, so up top we have our example here. I'm going to do a new color. So my first step, which I wrote the tips down below here for you to use if needed. So my first step is to get a difference of squares in the denominator. To do this, I see that I have 1 plus sine x in our denominator right now. So I know by what we did on Tuesday and Wednesday that if I have 1 plus something, if I multiply that by 1 minus something, I can get difference of squares, right? So then I'd have 1 minus something squared. So we're going to go through that a little bit more slowly, but that's where we're going with this. So in our denominator, what we're going to do is we're going to multiply it by 1 minus sine x. And then remember, because we don't want to change the value, we just want to change how this looks, we have to multiply the numerator also by 1 minus sine x. So 1 minus, sine x. And so now we have 1 minus sine x in the numerator, 1 minus sine x in the denominator. That's the same as multiplying by 1, but it looks really nice when we multiply it out. So we get 1 minus sine x in our numerator, because we just are multiplying across with fractions. And then in our denominator, we're going to get 1 minus sine squared x. So now if you don't immediately see how we got 1 minus sine squared x, go ahead and do the FOIL. So if I take a look at these two factors up here that I'm going to be multiplying together, I'm going to multiply the first ones. So 1 times 1 equals 1. So we're good there. And then our inner one, which is going to be sine times 1, which is sine. And then 1 times negative sine, which is negative sine. So sine plus negative sine equals 0. So those will cancel out. And then our last terms, sine x times negative sine x, gives us negative sine squared x. So we got that far. Our next tip tells us to use the Pythagorean identity to simplify. So when I'm looking at our denominator here, I'm thinking about what Pythagorean identity can I use in order to simplify this bottom. So take a look at your identity sheet and look at which one would make sense. Only one of them has sine squared in it, so that would be the one I would start with. So our Pythagorean identity, sine squared, or x plus cosine x squared equals 1. Equals 1 can be rewritten. So we have cosine squared x equals 1 minus sine squared x. And that's what's in our denominator. So right away I can substitute cosine squared x in for my denominator, which is going to make it a lot easier. So next step, we're going to do that substitution. Equals 1 minus sine x in our numerator. Denominator becomes cosine squared x. Now I'm going to do that thing where I rewrite this expression horizontally versus vertically because I think it's going to help us see where we're going. So next step, we're going to just rewrite the same thing, 1 minus sine x divided by 1 over cosine x. Sorry, cosine squared x. Now some of you guys are saying, this looks familiar, and it should. That's because we're dividing by a fraction, which means we can multiply by the reciprocal. So this thing is the same as 1 minus sine x times quantity times cosine squared x, because the reciprocal of 1 over cosine squared x is just cosine x, right? Because it would be like having a 1 in the denominator. So there you go. We got rid of our fractions, and we can say that we're a success. So give this trick a try at home when you're doing your homework or trying some problems by yourself or looking over the problems that we did in class. See if you can replicate it. And let me know if you have any questions. Let me know in the comments below if you're having trouble getting to the difference of squares or knowing how to get to the difference of squares or doing the substitution with the Pythagorean identities, or if it's what comes after that that's causing you trouble. That is all for now. Have a good day.